This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Wanted to shout out TrueFire, who sponsored the channel. My favourite course on there, I think, at the moment is Tim Miller's Creative Arpeggio Design course, where he talks about his kind of own fairly unique approach to arpeggios, where he's doing 2 notes on one string, 1 on the next, 2 again, 1, 2 and 1. And this is how he has sort of organised some of his playing and technique so that he can you know, with consistency and with some confidence, know that, you know, whenever he goes for something, that it's going to be something that's within his technical grasp. Of course, Tim Miller is an amazing player, but it's really interesting to get this sort of insight from a professional fusion legend. So Tim Miller, creative arpeggio design. You can use the code JNC40 to get 40% of any of their courses, or the code JNC100 to get $100 off of All Access membership. And All Access membership is a way that you can basically dip in and out of the whole catalogue for an entire year and get inspiration that way. So cheers, TrueFire. Right, so I grabbed this off of my buddy Jake, and this is a 2-Rock Classic Reverb signature. This is the 40-watt version. Now, he had 2 amps that he was selling, and this one meant that he would have more money to buy Christmas presents for people. So this is the one that I grabbed off him. I got a chance to gig this on Saturday, so I just wanted to share some of that experience in case anyone was at all interested. I'm not suggesting that you necessarily should be, but you might be if you click this video. I don't know. But I've got some footage from the gig, so I'll share you some bits of that. If you're interested in the pedal board and signal chain, which I guess kind of matters, it's this. So my main sort of drive is the Angry driver in JHS Angry Charlie mode, which is essentially a Marshall governor type circuit. And then I've got a compressor here, which is pretty much always on, running the drive into the compression, which is a bit of an odd way to do it. And then there's Blues Breaker here, which I kick on sometimes, and a Tube Screamer, which actually sounded really good with this. And then this was the 5-Watt World BUSS, the Bus Barber Electronics thing, which on the day wasn't doing what I wanted. So I need to look at that again, because I think this was set below Unity. And so when I was going to use this as a boost, it just didn't really work. Oh, and then the HX Stomp is just doing delays and going to front of house. I've had a suspicion about this before, because I've seen my buddy Jake and playing live with his 2-Rock. He's got an SSS, and it's such a huge sound. And we actually did a function gig together as well, where he was playing a traditional clean. We were playing in a venue with a limiter, and the 2-Rock sound is, I think, huge. Basically, like a lot of mid focus, a lot of low mids, quite a tight bass, and then like a soft high end, essentially, is what I think of it as. It's kind of that Dumble inspired clean sound, right? But what it does mean is that in context of like a function band, you can have quite a mid heavy guitar sound, and it may not sit amazingly well for some genres. So for instance, the band that I play in, the set list includes tunes like Bruno Mars' Treasure, Sweet Home Alabama, Simply the Best. We played Living on a Prayer on Saturday, whenever it was. You know, a good selection of stuff, some like Dua Lipa stuff. What else? Trying to think of stuff. Shut Up and Dance, bits and pieces, but the real key for that band is that I need a real clean, as well as quite heavy drive. You know, like we're playing Teenage Dirtbag, we're playing tunes like that. You know, sort of. A whole range of stuff, and I think probably quite a lot of function bands are like that, in that you play a huge selection of stuff from like maybe even a 50-year span. The thing is that for some of that stuff, I feel like it's almost a little bit too mid-heavy. So things like Teenage Dirtbag and stuff like that, and some other bits and pieces, it almost kind of like is too much in some ways. So I think in future I'm going to try running the mids a bit lower. There's also on the master, we got like 3 gain structures, and the lowermost setting is more kind of Fender blackface, which might end up being a bit more scooped and a bit more appropriate. I was running it in the classic 2-rock mode. In between that, they got like the Matt Schofield mode. What I think this would really excel at might be like the either really blues focused gig, or something where there's just one guitar and maybe not a keyboard, and you're, you know, filling up more of the spectrum, because I just feel like it's a little bit of a big sound for maybe the average function band in some ways, whereas something like this Matchless Lightning is a little bit less mid-heavy, a little bit more scooped in comparison, and then, you know, it ends up working in a mix and stuff. Also, I'm running it in 20-watt low mode, and I'm still not really even cracking the master above sort of 2 or 3. It's a really, really incredibly loud amp, and so one of my thoughts about 2-rocks in general were, why would you go for the 40-watt when there's 50 and 100 watts? Surely the 40-watt is going to sound noticeably quieter or whatever. I feel like the 40-watt is still so loud that you're going to easily cope with any gigging situation, and it runs sort of crystal clean, as loud as you'd ever need it. This is the thing, like, compared to a Fender style amplifier, although it is very much in that kind of Fender realm of sonic sound, you can run it clean at really, really loud volumes, whereas something like the Pro Reverb behind me, once you get the volume above sort of 4, even on a Strat, you're going to start to get into some sort of breakup territory. So that's definitely a thing to be aware of. It's heavy, so that's something else, not necessarily ideal. I have sort of put out the feelers for changing this to a head shell. The other kind of elephant in the room is, I think last year I did about 30 gigs, and on average those pay about £250. If I do a duo in the day, it's like £400. So let's call it £250 times 30, £7,500. Now the 2-rock classic Reverb combo, if you were to buy it new, it's like £5,700. Is such a crazy amount of money that I don't really necessarily even know if it's focused towards like a professional musician. Also, there were some folks that worked in dentistry at the gig. They were genuinely, apparently. But so yeah, it's a lot of money to take on a gig where you kind of, it is unpredictable what can happen on some of these gigs. So for example, during the break, some very pleasant individuals decided that they'd have a go on the keyboard and also have a little bit of a go on the drums. And nothing else really happened, but you never really know what might happen. Things can get spilled and all that sort of stuff. And realistically, is this the sort of thing that you want to have that amount of money tied up in and gig live? As for alternatives to this, I guess you could get like a Fender reissue type thing. There are also things like the VHT D50, which are probably on the cheapest side of things that could do this sort of tone if it was what you were going for. The classic Reverb signature is more versatile than both of those options in a lot of ways. Doesn't have the drive channel of the VHT D50. I think a Cherrytone or carrier tone, however you say it, would be a really safe-ish bet as well. There are amplified Nation amps which are a little bit cheaper than the Two Rock, but if you're, addicted to that Two Rock sound, I guess that is basically your options are not huge. But let me know in the comments if you've got other things that you think would easily cope with that sort of situation. I think it's just got a huge sort of round sound to it. Not necessarily appropriate for every gig at all. It's very heavy. I think it sounds really, really amazing at home at any volume. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to actually get across on the mic, because I'm A, not amazing at miking up amplifiers, and B, I think the more you kind of do this sort of thing, you do realise that there is quite a lot that is kind of lost in the room versus what happens on the mic. And I'm sure there's going to be people that in the comments will mention that, it pretty much sounds like you. And that, when Mick from That Pedal Show, I played his TS1 on a gig with Jake, and he said, what did you think? I was like, it kind of sounded like me playing through an amp. And that is kind of the long and short of it with most of this gear stuff. Is you're not going to sound worlds apart from what you already sound like. But I guess for some people, this is a holy grail amplifier. And yeah, I wanted to give it a try, and let me know your thoughts. If you've got any, who is the Two Rock for? Would you ever gig one? Is it an aspirational amp for you, or do you think it's a little bit silly? I'd like to know your thoughts. For me, it's a lot of money to be taken out in the car on a gig, isn't it? So when I'm, not necessarily earning loads and loads of money from gigging in general, but it was really, really fun on the gig. I think next time I'm going to try running those mids a bit lower, and I might run it in the more classic Fender mode rather than the straightforward Two Rock mode, and give that a try and see what that ends up being like. It does stay super kind of clean up front as well, like the delays going into it, so it handles everything really well. It's just I felt like it was maybe even too big a sound for the band, but I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Cheers.